Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Constant structure chords. There are two main types, the diatonic type, which is very useful for all kinds of easy composing and can give you really rich and satisfying immediate results, and chromatic constant structure chords, a little more complicated, a little darker, a little more cinematic. Well, let's take a look at how this shows up in epic and cinematic writing and pop writing, talk a little bit about the ideas behind them, how we can use it for ourselves. Constant structure chords are not rocket science, although I think you probably could take the logical extreme very far, but I'll show you what I mean. This very simple C major triad is a structure. And that structure, 2/3, one on top of the other, can be moved diatonically, just moving on the white keys, all the notes staying in the C major scale, to create what I'm going to call a constant structure sequence. I think my first forays into piano when I was, 8, 9, 10, 11, were things like playing the triads and just moving them around in root position. And at that time, to my ear, that sounded just delightful. I just love that. But we want to take our constant structures into new territories, into new sort of domains that will give us richer sounding sonorities. And honestly, even if you don't know the names of some of these constant structure assemblages, they'll still work great. Here's a short that I posted this week. Take a look at it. It's only 30, 40 seconds or so. And then we'll kind of break it down. I'm just going to run it. We'll be back in a second. Build great new chord shapes from simple stacks. This is a D minor 11 chord, all 7 notes of the D Dorian scale, but I'm going to throw away the A and I'm going to throw away the G. And now I have these notes, and I'm going to take the D and move it to the middle. So all the same notes, and here's my new shape. It has a dense center with fifths on the outside, and when I move it around, it just sounds fantastic. That same shape, just to different notes of the D Dorian scale. Well, just to refresh your memory about what I did, I created a stack of thirds and said I love those notes. It's a complicated chord, but I want to get rid of a couple of the pitches, and so I got rid of the A and the G, and I took the D and moved it to the middle. And now I have, I'm going to play it as a block, a new assemblage. And this assemblage is kind of unique. It has a signature sound, and the signature sound is built from the intervals. So I have a fifth, major second, and a fifth on top. You can think of it as kind of an open sound with a chocolatey center, which is kind of how I experience it. Now, that assemblage is a beautiful sounding structure, and it invited me to move it up a step just on white keys. And as I did, I was just very satisfied with the result. And if you look over at this thing here, this program has like no idea what exactly it is. Often, constant structure chords will be hybrids or mashups of things, especially if you use structures like this one. Now, in the short, I said, what if I arpeggiate it? And it's beautiful. Right, very, very satisfying. I kind of love that effect. Well, that's a diatonic sequence of constant structure chords. And you can kind of make up anything you'd like as long as you like the sound of it, and see what happens as you push it through a scale. The scale, of course, doesn't have to be C major, depending on your keyboard skills or your ability to just grab the notes that you recorded and transpose them to a new key level. You can play it in anything that your vocalist wants you to or anything that pleases your ear. For major scales, do it in white keys and shift it to a new key. Go ahead. Who cares, right? Or learn to play it like me in every key. But I'm interested not just in constant structure chords that adhere to a regular scale, a diatonic scale, major or minor, but also constant structures that are chromatic. Well, my teacher called this style of voicing chords and moving them around a scale coupling. Coupling. I've used that expression here on this channel before, and it's also found, I think there's another expression that's found a lot of favor recently called planing. A choreographer friend of mine calls it birding, like a flock of birds all moving at once to the left, at once to the right, or maybe a school of fish. You get the image, right? So the thing is about this style of motion is as you move the constant structure shape, if you stick to a scale, you'll get different qualities of intervals as you move. Here, for instance, the bottom is a minor third and the top is major. And then when I move down a step in the C scale, we also get the same shape, but one more step down, and now the bottom interval is major and the top interval is minor. And that's going to be true as I slip around through the whole system. Here, both intervals are minor. In other words, the relative intervals adhere to the scale rather than to a almost mathematical formula of intervallic relationships. When you adhere to a strict mathematical formula of intervallic relationships, wow, that's a mouthful. When you stick with the structure of the chord, it's a fourth, it's a major third, it's a second. You have a potential for chromatic constant structure chords, and they sound awesome. Maybe the most famous one from the American classical music or jazz canon is the So What chord from the Miles Davis tune of the same name, major third on top and then a stack of fourths underneath. As I step this structure around, I adhere to that rule, major third on top, perfect fourths, and you can hear it's got a kind of a beauty and mystery. It's super hard to replicate unless you step outside the simple diatonic systems that, we're associated with. The truth is, and I've done this before here, but it's worth repeating, any melody can sound kind of amazing when it's coupled chromatically, when constant structure chords move in parallel like that. Like take, for instance, Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I'm going to use So What chords to play it. It's a rich sound, a sound that kind of goes beyond diatonic harmony, and yet your ear is willing to accept it as logical. In fact, whenever you play any instrument that has an overtone structure, anything more complicated than a sine wave, the fundamental tone is accompanied by overtones, by upper harmonics, whose relationship to the fundamental remains fixed. And so, in a sense, it's its own kind of coupled or constant structure environment, right? An instrumental timbre is a type of constant structure, is a type of coupling. The overtone series of a clarinet is very different from the overtone series of a trumpet. And those overtones and how they move as the fundamental moves is a big cue to our ear about what the instrument is and how pleasing it is. Are the overtones in tune? All those kinds of questions. Doing things like this in strings can be very, very exciting. A very simple and elegant and beautiful melody, perhaps, expressed like this, say. So there's my lovely little melody that I just extemporized. I'm going to copy it over here. And then I'm just going to create some secondary versions of it at intervals above it. Option, click and drag. My first one will just be at the fifth, and I'm going to take the velocities of those down to make it quieter. So now I have a complicated constant structure expression of this melody, the fundamental tone being at the bottom. Fifth, minor sixth, minor third. Probably the thing that we'll notice the most in the sound of it is this D against this D flat. Let's listen, hear what it sounds like. Sounds major, doesn't it? But when we harmonize it, you could analyze those chords, but you couldn't analyze them functionally. I've actually created a new timbre, a new instrumental texture. I'm going to delete the dissonant tone. The parallel fifths give us a strength, and then the sixth gives us a certain amount of sweetness. Use these constant structure chords in your own work in a couple of ways. Diatonic constant structure chords on the keyboard are super easy in the key of C. You've probably realized by now, if you're a guitarist, that chromatic constant structure chords are what the guitar is made for, right? Just shift around from fret to fret and you're good to go. It's fascinating. Each instrument has its own sort of relationship to how these kinds of things could happen. I particularly love this chromatic approach that we just looked at in orchestral writing, handing out parts to strings and winds and brass, taking a simple melody and creating almost a new timbre, almost a new instrument that's coupled. You know, you're creating orchestral writers call it a device. What's the melodic device? And what instruments are playing that melody right there? And the device has its own texture almost. It's a really powerful approach to harmony that doesn't, adhere to conventional 18th and 19th century practice at all, but still gives you kind of a rich and sort of satisfying texture. Super fun. Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe and ding the bell. You'll be notified when I do my videos. I'll see you next time.